In 1914, Henry Ford did something no industrialist had ever done. He doubled his workers' wages to $5 a day, twice the national average. The world called him a saint, a visionary, the man who built the middle class. But here's what they didn't tell you. That same year, he hired a private army of thugs to beat union organizers in his factories. He published a newspaper blaming Jews for every war in history. He gave a medal to Adolf Hitler. And when his own son begged him to stop, he destroyed him. Henry Ford didn't just build cars. He built a machine, and he fed people into it, including his own family. This is the story of the man who changed the world. And the darkness nobody wants to remember. Henry Ford was born on a farm in Dearborn, Michigan in 1863. He hated farming. He loved machines. At 15, he took apart and rebuilt every watch in his neighborhood. At 30, he built his first gasoline engine in his kitchen sink. At 40, in 1903, he founded the Ford Motor Company with $28,000 from investors who didn't understand what he was building. What he was building was a Model T, not a car for the rich, a car for everyone. I will build a motor car for the great multitude, he said. It will be so low in price that no man making a good salary will be unable to own one. In 1908, the Model T cost $850. By 1925, thanks to the moving assembly line Ford perfected, it cost $260. 15 million were sold. Half the cars in America were Fords, but the real revolution wasn't the car. It was a factory that in 1913, Ford introduced the moving assembly line at his Highland Park plant. Before, a team of workers built an entire car together. Now, each worker stood in one place and performed one task, attaching a wheel, screwing a bolt over and over for 100 times a day. The time to build a car dropped from 12 hours to 93 minutes. Production soared, costs plummeted, and the workers, they became parts of the machine. The turnover was brutal. Workers quit in droves. The work was repetitive, dehumanizing, dangerous. Men collapsed from exhaustion. Fingers were crushed. Spirits were broken. So in 1914, Ford made his famous offer. $5 a day, double the average wage. But there was a catch. To get it, you had to let Ford's sociological department inspect your home. They checked your bank account, your marriage, your drinking habits, your church attendance, your language. If you spoke too much immigrant slang, if you didn't attend church, if your wife worked outside the home, you didn't get the $5. Ford wasn't paying workers. He was buying control. The world cheered. Other automakers copied him. The $5 day created the American middle class. Or so the story goes. What the story leaves out is what happened next in 1918. Ford bought a small-town newspaper called the Dearborn Independent. He turned it into a national weekly with a circulation of 900,000, second only to the Saturday Evening Post. And every week on the front page, he ran the same headline, "The International Jew, the World's Foremost Problem." It was a 91-part series. It blamed Jewish people for everything. World War I, a Jewish plot. The Bolshevik Revolution, Jewish bankers. Jazz music, Jewish corruption of American culture. Short skirts, Jewish moral decay. The Protocols of the Elders of Zion, a fabricated document claiming a Jewish conspiracy for world domination, was reprinted in full. Ford had it translated into German. He distributed it across Europe. Adolf Hitler read it. In Mein Kampf, Hitler called Ford a single great man who still maintains full independence from Jewish influence. In 1938, Nazi Germany awarded Ford the Grand Cross of the German Eagle, their highest honor for foreigners. Ford accepted it. He kept it on his desk until he died. His son, Edsel, begged him to stop. Edsel was everything Henry wasn't. Elegant, artistic, diplomatic kind. He loved design. He collected art. He wanted Ford to build beautiful cars, not just cheap ones. He wanted to negotiate with unions, not fight them. He wanted his father to stop publishing hate. Henry responded by destroying him. Edsel became president of Ford Motor Company in 1919, in name only. Henry never gave him real power. When Edsel designed the Lincoln Continental, one of the most beautiful American cars ever built, Henry dismissed it as too fancy. When Edsel tried to modernize the factories, Henry tore out the new equipment overnight. When Edsel wanted to treat workers with dignity, Henry sent in Harry Bennett. Harry Bennett was Henry Ford's personal enforcer. A former Navy boxer with a criminal record, Bennett ran the service department, a 3,000-man private army of ex-convicts, boxers, and thugs. They wore black suits and carried blackjacks, guns, and brass knuckles. Their job was to intimidate workers, break unions, and spy on employees. Bennett's office was in a fortified building on the Rouge River plant called the Iron Mountain. It had no windows. Inside, there were weapons, a trapdoor, and a rumor, never proven, never dismissed, of a torture chamber. In 1932, during the Great Depression, unemployed workers marched on the Rouge plant demanding jobs. Bennett's men opened fire. 4 were killed. Dozens were wounded. It was called the Ford Massacre. Henry Ford blamed communists and outside agitators. He never apologized. He never visited the families. Edsel watched all of this. He watched his father's newspaper spread poison across the country. He watched Bennett's thugs beat men in the factories his family name was built on. He watched his father grow more paranoid, more cruel, more obsessed with control. And he couldn't stop any of it. In 1943, Edsel Ford died of stomach cancer. He was 49. His wife, Eleanor, believed the stress of working for his father killed him. Henry didn't attend the funeral. He was too busy. Within months, he forced Edsel's widow to sign over Edsel's voting shares, threatening to destroy the company if she refused. He took control of his grandchildren's inheritance. He put Harry Bennett in charge of everything that Edsel's son, Henry Ford II, just 25 years old, had to fight his own grandfather for control of the company. In 1945, with the help of his grandmother and a group of investors, he finally ousted the old man. Henry Ford Sr. died 2 years later, still publishing his newspaper, still blaming Jews for the world's problems, still convinced he was the hero of the story. The Ford family didn't escape the darkness. It followed them. Henry Ford II, Hank the Deuce, saved the company from bankruptcy after World War II, but he was a womanizer, an alcoholic, and a bully. He fired Lee Iacocca, the man who created the Mustang, out of personal spite. He cheated on his wife publicly. He died in 1987, estranged from much of his family. His son, Edsel Ford II, tried to be different. He focused on philanthropy, on art, on rebuilding the family's reputation. But the name was stained. Every Ford Foundation grant, every museum donation, every press release about corporate responsibility carried the ghost of the Dearborn Independent. In 2001, the Ford Motor Company finally issued a formal apology for Henry Ford's anti-Semitism. It took 83 years. Today, the Ford family still controls 40% of Ford Motor Company voting stock through a special class of shares. They're worth billions. But the name will never be clean. Every F-150 truck, every Mustang, every Ford logo on a stadium, it all traces back to a man who paid workers enough to buy his cars while beating the ones who asked for dignity, who built the American middle class while trying to destroy a people he blamed for every evil in the world, who created the future and poison at the same time. Henry Ford's great-great-grandson is named Henry Ford III. He works for the company. He gives interviews about innovation and legacy. He never talks about the Dearborn Independent. He never talks about Harry Bennett's thugs. He never talks about the medal from Hitler. And maybe that's the real tragedy. Not that Henry Ford was a monster, but that his family in America still wants to remember the $5 day and forget the rest. Still wants to celebrate the assembly line and ignore the assembly line of hate he built alongside it. Still wants to call him a visionary while his newspaper sits in archives waiting for someone to read it and realize the man who built modern America also tried to burn part of it down. The Model T changed the world. The assembly line changed the world. The $5 day changed the world. But so did the Dearborn Independent. So did the Ford Massacre. So did the medal from Nazi Germany. And you can't separate them. You can't take the light without the dark. You can't build a machine for the masses and not ask what else that machine was grinding up. Henry Ford died in 1947, worth over $1 billion. He was buried in Dearborn, not far from the farm where he was born. On his tombstone, they wrote, "He helped build America." They didn't write what else he tried to tear down. The Ford family built the 20th century, and the 20th century is still trying to figure out if it was worth the cost.